Imagine standing in line at an airport, heart fluttering with equal parts excitement and nervousness. The hum of announcements echoes over the intercom, and passengers hustle by with suitcases in tow. You notice a young black girl about 15, speaking softly to her father in a lilting accent that sets her apart. Suddenly, a snide giggle ripples through the nearby flight crew. They point at her and whisper rude remarks about the way she speaks. In that moment, the father's eyes darken, a silent storm brewing. Little do they know, this man, protective, composed and quietly powerful, is the CEO of the very airline they represent. The morning was buzzing at Hartsfield-Jackson, Atlanta, International Airport, known as the busiest airport in the world. People from all walks of life navigated bustling corridors and mile-long security lines. The overhead boards flickered with departure and arrival times. Airlines vied for attention, and among them was Delta Airlines, an industry titan that prided itself on hospitality and global reach. In the thick of this vibrant chaos, 15-year-old Nia walked alongside her father, Michael Phillips. Nia was tall for her age, with braids that swept across her shoulders and big, curious eyes that scanned her surroundings. She spoke with a gentle, West African lilt, a legacy of the years she'd spent with her mother in Ghana. Michael, on the other hand, carried himself with a quiet certainty. His impeccable navy blue suit fit his athletic frame, and a subtle signet ring glimmered on his right hand. An air of mystery surrounded him, hinting at something more profound than just a regular businessman on a trip. The pair had arrived early. Michael was methodical about punctuality. He wanted ample time to check in, sort out any possible complications, and find a comfortable spot for a coffee or light meal before boarding. Nia, excited about her first major trip in years, chatted about their final destination. They were headed to New York for a special event that Michael had only described as important. Nia didn't know that important barely scratched the surface of what awaited them. For all Nia understood, this was just another father-daughter trip, a bonding opportunity after being separated for much of her childhood when Michael's work took him around the globe. While they walked, Nia noticed several uniformed crew members, men and women with flight pins glinting on their lapels passing by in purposeful strides. Flight attendants in crisp uniforms gave them polite nods, but some paused to take a second look. Some recognized Michael from corporate newsletters and leadership bulletins. His face was known internally, but he wasn't a household name publicly. Michael's instructions to the airline were always to remain discreet about his presence. He never wanted personal recognition to overshadow the collective accomplishments of the employees. As they approached the check-in area, Michael pointed out the lines that had already formed. "Let's get in line now, or we'll be stuck here forever." He joked. Nia grinned, adjusting her backpack straps. She glanced around, noticing the wide array of travelers, large families with kids clinging to teddy bears, business people tapping away on laptops, anxious backpackers rummaging for passports. The world had converged in this one spot, and it was exhilarating. From a short distance, a trio of flight attendants, 2 women and a man, huddled together. One of the women, named Susan, had auburn hair pinned into a neat bun. She eyed Nia and Michael momentarily, her lips twisting into a smirk. Dan. The male attendant whispered something to Karen. The other woman in the group, Karen, let out a small, sneering laugh. It wasn't clear yet what had amused them, but Susan's gaze lingered on Nia's face, taking in every feature, then shifting to her father. Nia, feeling slightly self-conscious under the unexpected scrutiny, looked away. She tugged at her father's sleeve. "Daddy, they're looking at us," she said softly, a slight anxiety creeping into her voice. Michael gave a quick glance in their direction, but saw only an ordinary set of flight attendants, people he might meet in a boardroom or at the annual training sessions, but whose faces he didn't immediately recall. He smiled reassuringly at Nia. "Ignore them, sweetheart. We're just early people. Sometimes stare when they're bored." Nia nodded, but a twinge of discomfort remained. Her accent, though beautiful to those who appreciated its melody, had often made her a target. She had faced schoolyard teasing and countless assumptions that she didn't belong because she didn't speak exactly like her American peers. Michael had always told her to be proud of her heritage, and she was, but that pride didn't stop her from feeling the sting of ridicule whenever it occurred. The check-in went smoothly. Michael placed their passports and tickets on the counter, receiving a warm smile from the gate agent. They proceeded to baggage drop-off with no issues. So far, everything was routine. A typical day at the airport, or so. Nia thought. Little did she know events were set into motion that morning, forging a path no one could have predicted. After clearing security, father and daughter strolled toward one of the many lounges. As a high-ranking executive, Michael had lounge access, but he rarely used it. He preferred to mingle with the everyday travelers to understand their experiences. Still, Nia was hungry, and the lounge offered quick refreshments. They took the escalator up, passing a digital screen showcasing Delta's corporate leadership. For just a fraction of a second, Michael's face and title, Chief Executive Officer, appeared on a rotation of top-tier executives. In that moment, Dan, the flight attendant from earlier, stepped onto the escalator just behind them. His eyes flicked from the screen to Michael's face, recognition sparking in them. But Dan said nothing. He simply stared. Once inside the lounge, Nia and Michael found a small table near the large floor-to-ceiling windows that afforded a mesmerizing view of planes taking off. Nia helped herself to a glass of orange juice and a cinnamon roll, while Michael answered a few emails on his phone. The overhead speakers played soft music, interspersed with boarding announcements. Moments later, Susan and Karen entered the lounge. Dan trailed behind them. Apparently reluctant, Susan and Karen wore matching expressions of mild frustration, as if they'd been discussing a heated topic. Their eyes fell on Nia and Michael, seated in a quiet corner. Nia was in mid-sentence describing to her father some cultural dance she'd learned in Ghana. Her accent, naturally thicker when she was excited, rang clearly across the hush of the lounge. Susan's lip curled in annoyance. She nudged Karen, and they both snickered. Karen muttered something inaudible, but Dan shushed them, glancing around nervously. He knew enough about the corporate structure to realize they were mocking none other than the CEO's child, a catastrophic mistake in any scenario. But he couldn't bring himself to intervene more forcefully. Instead, he hovered, a silent participant in their indiscretion. Nia was oblivious at first, lost in conversation with her father, but eventually she became aware of the quiet, mocking laughter. She paused, words caught in her throat, as the joyous expression faded from her face. Michael noticed immediately. He turned his head and saw Susan and Karen looking away, hastily, feigning interest in the lounge's buffet selection. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" Michael asked, setting his phone aside. Nia swallowed hard. "They were laughing at my accent," she said quietly. She looked down at the glass of orange juice in her hand, suddenly losing her appetite. Michael's jaw tightened. He'd spent his life championing diversity and inclusion within the airline. From scholarship programs to mentorship initiatives, he'd worked tirelessly to ensure such behavior was rooted out not just for publicity, but from genuine conviction. Knowing that members of his own crew still harbored such disrespect struck him like a personal betrayal. But Michael also knew better than to confront them right then and there. He wanted to be sure to observe, He placed a comforting hand over Naya's "Finish your juice. We'll head to the gate soon. Okay? Nia nodded, trying to muster a smile. Although she was used to rudeness, having it happen so blatantly in front of her father was a different kind of pain. She felt as if she'd embarrassed him by existing in a way that drew negative attention. Little did either of them realize that this small moment was only the beginning. The judgmental stares and sneers were about to escalate, fueled by Karen and Susan's thoughtless sense of humor, and complicated by the fact that Dan was the only one aware of Michael's true identity. The stage was set for something far more dramatic than a typical morning in Atlanta. Boarding time for their flight to New York approached. Michael and Naya walked toward Gate A17, weaving through throngs of people dragging carry-ons. The large digital sign overhead flashed New York, on time. A small relief in a world where delays were the norm. As they approached the gate, they saw a small commotion near the boarding podium. A passenger was arguing loudly with a gate agent about an overbooked seat. A manager rushed over to help defuse the situation. Meanwhile, a line began to form for pre-boarding, and families with small children juggled strollers and diaper bags. Nia noticed the same trio of flight attendants, Susan, Karen, and Dan, who stood near the cockpit door, presumably waiting to welcome passengers aboard. Susan flipped through some paperwork, and Karen was chatting with a pilot. Dan looked particularly anxious, his eyes scanning the crowd until he spotted Michael and Naya. Their gazes met briefly, and Dan gave a tense nod. Michael, for his part, gave a polite smile, but said nothing. Boarding was called for first class and priority passengers. Michael placed a gentle hand on Naya's back to guide her forward, while they typically flew economy. By Michael's choice, his status in the airline sometimes automatically upgraded him. He considered it a perk he rarely used. But for this trip, it was important for Nia to have a comfortable experience, and so they accepted the first-class seats assigned to them. As they stepped on the jet bridge, Karen's voice carried over the hum of the air conditioning. "Hope we don't have to deal with any more brats on this flight," she muttered, glancing in the direction of the passenger who'd been arguing. Then her eyes locked on Nia. Although she didn't speak loudly, her sneer was unmistakable. Nia's face heated, and she lowered her head, gripping her boarding pass too tightly. Michael heard it as well. The father in him wanted to confront Karen, but the CEO in him decided to bide his time. A public confrontation in a narrow jet bridge would create a scene that might overshadow the real issue. Still, the anger in his gut twisted tighter. The plane's interior was modern and sleek, with plush seats in first-class attendants, busied themselves stowing coats and offering welcome beverages. Michael guided Nia to their seats, 2A and 2B near the window. She settled in, fiddling with the seat controls, trying to distract herself from the tension she felt. About 5 minutes later, Karen and Susan walked up and down the aisle, double-checking seatbelts and overhead bins. When Karen reached Michael and Nia's row, she paused, eyes narrowing at Nia. "Please put your bag all the way under the seat," Karen said curtly. Nia had already done so, but she pushed it a fraction of an inch further, feeling oddly threatened. "Is there a problem?" Michael asked, quietly, leveling a calm gaze at Karen. Karen plastered on a fake smile. "Oh, no problem, sir. I'm just making sure your daughter knows how to follow instructions." There was an insidious tone beneath her politeness that made Naya's skin crawl. Michael maintained his composure. "She understands just fine." He made sure to keep his tone neutral, but the stiffness in his shoulders spoke volumes. Karen nodded, but as she turned away, a whispered, "Geez, that accent!" slipped from her lips. Michael's eyes narrowed. Nia sank deeper into her seat, mortified. Meanwhile, Susan hovered nearby with a stack of safety cards. She made no overt remarks, but the smirk on her lips confirmed she was in on the ridicule. Dan, trailing behind them, shot an apologetic glance at Michael, and mouthed something like, "I'm sorry." He looked trapped. Desperate not to become the target of Karen's mean streak, but also unwilling to condone her behavior, the cabin crew continued their pre-flight routine. Passengers in economy class filed in, stowing their bags and settling into seats. A safety announcement droned overhead, accompanied by the usual demonstrations. Susan's voice came on the intercom, instructing passengers how to buckle seatbelts and locate the exits. As they pushed back from the gate, Nia peered out the window, watching the ground crew wave their signals. She tried to keep her mind on the excitement of takeoff. Flying always fascinated her, how something so heavy could lift into the clouds. But now even that wonder was tainted by the harsh reality that she was under scrutiny by people whose job it was to serve and protect passengers. The engines roared. Vibrations pulsed through the cabin, and soon they were airborne. The city of Atlanta spread out below them, diminishing into a patchwork of roads and buildings. Michael took one last look as the plane climbed above the clouds, his face a mask of quiet determination. He resolved that the time for quiet observation would soon be over. Once the seatbelt sign dinged off, the first-class cabin buzzed with attendants taking meal orders, handing out drinks and offering hot towels. Karen seemed to focus her attention on other passengers, deliberately ignoring Michael and Nia until all others had been addressed. When she finally approached them, her expression was neutral, but her words were clipped. "Would you two like something to drink?" she asked, pen hovering above a small notepad. "Orange juice for my daughter." "Coffee for me," Michael replied politely, refusing to rise to her hostility. His strategy was to remain calm until the moment was right to act. He wanted no room for the crew to claim he was aggressive or rude. Karen gave a perfunctory nod and left. 10 minutes passed and still no drinks arrived. Every other passenger in first class had been served. Michael glanced around, noticing the other rows, happily sipping their beverages or stirring sugar into coffee cups. Nia, throat parched, kept casting glances at the galley. Finally, Dan appeared with a tray, holding 2 drinks. "I'm sorry about the delay," he whispered, placing them in front of Michael and Nia. He shot them a sympathetic look. Karen got busy. Nia thanked him softly, taking the orange juice with both hands. Dan nodded and hurried away to attend to other tasks, seemingly not wanting Karen or Susan to see him linger. About an hour into the flight, the attendants began serving the in-flight meals. Karen went down the aisle with the meal cart, offering entrees to first-class passengers. She skipped Michael and Nia again, prompting Dan to rectify the situation. By the time Dan got them their meals, the food was lukewarm. Nia picked at hers, appetite diminished by the knot in her stomach. Meanwhile, Michael sipped coffee, eyes flicking to his phone. He noted the flight number, the attendants' names on their badges, Karen M, Susan T, and Dan L, and the seat configuration. He typed discreet notes, a habit formed from years of corporate oversight. The wheels in his mind turned each instance of disrespect, building a larger case that he would address soon enough. He wasn't a man who tolerated discrimination, especially not within the airline. He ran. About halfway through the flight, Susan made a snarky announcement over the intercom. She reminded passengers to keep their voices down and remain considerate, saying, "We have a variety of backgrounds on board, so keep communication clear and respectful." Although her words sounded general, her tone and the timing suggested it was aimed at Nia, who had just asked her father a question, quietly enough, but in an accent that Susan seemed to find offensive. A few passengers glanced around in confusion. 1 or 2 in the first-class cabin seemed to sense something was off, shooting sidelong looks at Susan. Yet no one spoke up. Confronting flight attendants can be intimidating, especially at 30,000 feet, and no one wanted to stir up potential conflict. So the tension hung silently in the recycled air, thick as the clouds outside. Nia locked eyes with her father. "I'm sorry, Dad," she whispered, tears threatening to spill. "I don't want to cause trouble." Michael took her hand gently. "You're not causing trouble." "They are," he said softly but firmly. "And they will have to answer for it." Karen and Susan seemed buoyed by the lack of immediate repercussions for their behavior. Emboldened, they occasionally cast smirks in Nia's direction, whispering to each other as they passed. Dan kept his head down, obviously torn but powerless without higher authority. The flight was halfway done, but for Nia, it felt like it had stretched into eternity. The only respite came when Karen and Susan retreated to the galley to gossip, leaving Dan to handle passenger requests. He brought Nia a complimentary chocolate bar, sneaking it onto her tray. With a kind smile, Michael recognized Dan's discreet attempts to mitigate the hostility, but the father in him was less than satisfied. A single kind gesture did not erase systemic prejudice. Soon turbulence rattled the cabin, forcing attendants to strap in. Karen sat across from Nia in a jump seat. Their eyes met in a tense standoff. Nia looked away, trying to focus on the seatback pocket in front of her. Karen, with her arms crossed, let a derisive snort slip. The jolt of the plane amplified the awkward silence. When the turbulence subsided, Karen unbuckled and leaned forward, speaking quietly, so only Nia and Michael could hear. "So where'd you pick up that accent?" Her tone dripped with derision. "It's interesting," Michael bristled. "My daughter spent years in Ghana." "She speaks multiple languages, as a matter of fact." Karen shrugged, eyebrows rising. "Oh, that's nice," she replied, her voice telling a different story than her words. "I guess you're cultured or something." A swirl of anger and pain flickered across Nia's face, but she said nothing, just turned to stare out the window. Michael inhaled slowly, controlling his temper. The absolute gall of this flight attendant was beyond anything he'd experienced, particularly since inclusivity was one of Delta's core values. And ironically, she was unaware that the object of her scorn was the very man responsible for overseeing the entire airline's operations. By the time the seatbelt sign pinged off once more, Michael had witnessed enough. He was done observing. He resolved that once they landed, he would address this matter thoroughly. Yet fate had other plans for how the conflict would escalate before they even touched down at LaGuardia. Roughly 30 minutes before. Landing, Susan made an announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, please prepare for our initial descent into New York's LaGuardia Airport. Flight attendants, please secure the cabin." Karen and Susan went around to ensure tray tables were stowed and seats were upright. The lights in the cabin dimmed slightly in preparation. Michael and Noya buckled their seatbelts, the lights of the New York skyline now visible through the clouds. Suddenly, an alarm beeped near the flight deck. Susan and Karen snapped to attention. Dan, looking anxious, hurried to the cockpit. Passengers exchanged nervous glances. Moments later, the pilot came on the intercom to explain that a minor mechanical warning light had illuminated. They would be cleared to land, but emergency vehicles would be on standby as a precaution. The plane descended further, and the tension from the mechanical issue layered atop the pre-existing drama. As they neared the runway, an unsettling lurch shook the aircraft. Gasps rippled through the cabin. Nia gripped her father's arm, fear eclipsing her earlier humiliation. The plane touched down hard, bouncing once on the runway. Oxygen masks did not deploy, but the screech of the tires was louder than usual. Outside, flashing lights indicated emergency vehicles trailing them. The pilot managed to bring the aircraft safely to a taxi speed, and a round of relieved applause erupted. Karen's expression was unnerved as she tried to maintain professionalism. Susan remained composed on the surface, but her hands shook as she secured the galley. Dan was nearly pale, though he managed a small smile of relief in Michael and Nia's direction as he passed. The pilot taxied to an isolated area of the tarmac, where the plane underwent a quick inspection by ground staff and the waiting emergency teams. Once they confirmed it was safe, the plane was towed to a gate. The entire incident lasted about 30 minutes, but felt like an eternity to the anxious passengers. When the doors finally opened, a wave of relief washed over everyone. The airport staff outside assisted in deplaning. Karen and Susan stood at the exit, still forced to bid farewell with plastic smiles, though their nerves were clearly rattled. As Nia and Michael approached, Karen mustered her usual condescension. "Have a nice day," she said. Susan's lips twitched, but she remained silent. Michael paused just before stepping into the jet bridge, turning to face them. "I assure you I will," he said, his voice steady. Then, with a firm hand on Nia's shoulder, he led her out of the aircraft. Unbeknownst to the crew, Michael's phone had been capturing key details, some audio clips of the crew's remarks, timestamps of their actions, and notes about their treatment. He had enough to not only file a complaint, but to launch an internal investigation. Yet the confrontation that was about to happen wouldn't even wait for corporate processes to begin. Michael Phillips guided his daughter down the jet bridge with deliberate slowness, letting the river of passengers surge ahead. He wanted the cabin crew in front of him, wanted time to collect his simmering fury, wanted above all to be certain Nia was no longer within earshot of the attendants who had spent 3 hours chipping away at her dignity. At the mouth of the jet bridge, the hive buzz of LaGuardia greeted them. Overlapping gate announcements, rolling suitcase wheels, the faint hiss of espresso machines from a nearby Cafe Nero. Fluorescent ceiling panels reflected off polished terrazzo floors, turning every movement of the crowd into a restless play of light. Nia walked a half-step behind her father, clutching the fabric of his blazer as though it were a lifeline. She had plastered on a polite mask, but the set of her shoulders betrayed exhaustion, the kind that didn't come from turbulent landings or cramped cabins, but from the quieter turbulence of being mocked for simply existing. Michael slowed near gate D17. He spotted Robert Jenkins, the station's duty manager, leaning over a counter with a maintenance tablet in hand, debriefing 2 ground technicians about the cockpit fault light that had prompted the fire trucks on rollout. Robert's silver tie pin and old Delta Widget logo glinted when he straightened and caught sight of the CEO, Mr. Phillips. He blurted, voice shooting an octave higher than usual. Michael watched the recognition ripple across Robert's face, surprise, then quick professional poise. "Sir, I didn't realize you were on that rotation. Are you and your daughter all right? The post-flight indicates only a sensor hiccup, but we're cycling the hydraulics to be safe." "We're physically fine," Michael answered, extending a hand. His grip was steady, yet the underlying tension vibrated like a taut piano string. "But a different kind of system failed today, and it needs your immediate attention." Robert's brow furrowed. "Of course, sir. What happened?" Before Michael could elaborate, the 3 flight attendants stepped into the gate area. Susan strode first, her auburn bun slightly messier than when she'd begun the duty, followed by Karen, whose perfectly lined lipstick had thinned under stress. Dan lingered astride behind, scanning the concourse as though hoping to dissolve into it. The moment Karen spotted Michael speaking to a station manager, she stiffened, but she had not yet fit the puzzle pieces together. Susan's gaze swept past Nia with reflexive disdain. Dan's met Michael's for a heartbeat, and dropped a mute confession of everything he had witnessed. Michael repositioned himself so that the attendants would have to pass within mere feet. He wanted eye contact. He wanted the moment recorded in every neuron of their memories. "Nia," he murmured, "stay right beside me." His daughter nodded, but kept her head high. She could feel her pulse in her ears, echoing the metronome of the overhead PA final boarding call. "Flight 8195 to Dallas." Each automated syllable felt perversely normal against the private maelstrom whirling around her. Robert initiated the encounter. "Crew 17, this is Michael Phillips," he began, then stopped, realizing the absurdity of introducing the airline's chief executive to its own staff. Clearing his throat, he tried again. "Mr. Phillips wishes to discuss a customer service issue." Michael nodded, once concise. "Specifically an issue of harassment perpetrated by Miss Karen Matthews and Miss Susan Tilley toward my daughter. Over the course of the morning, they mocked her accent, questioned her intelligence, and withheld standard service items. Their conduct violates our non-discrimination mandate and the values charter. You both pledge to uphold." Susan's cheeks drained of color. Karen's eyes widened, flitting between Michael, Nia, and Robert, as though searching for some safety lever that might reset the scene. "So there's been a misunderstanding," she started, voice thin. "We never meant—" Michael raised a hand palm outward. The gesture was controlled, but carried the authority of a gavel strike. "Intent does not erase impact, Ms. Matthews, nor does stress excuse cruelty. My daughter's heritage is not a punchline." For a heartbeat, the bustling terminal seemed to hush, as though the HVAC itself paused to listen. A pair of elderly passengers with rolling walkers slowed nearby. A junior gate agent froze halfway to the printer. Mouth parted. Everyone sensed the sudden gravitational pull of power, empathy and reckoning converging. In one point, Robert inhaled through his nose, professional mask slipping into genuine anger. "Karen, Susan, we'll step into Concourse Office B. Security will take your preliminary statements. Mr. Phillips, do you wish to file an immediate incident record?" "I already have," Michael said, tapping his phone screen. On it sat time-stamped notes, voice memo snippets. Michael had discreetly captured Karen's final microaggression on the jump seat after turbulence. "But first, my daughter deserves an apology, issued without caveat or defensiveness." The two women looked at Nia. Really looked, perhaps for the first time since that morning. Nia held their gaze no longer the silent, shrinking girl on row 2B, but the living embodiment of every passenger they had subconsciously deemed less worthy. "I'm sorry," Susan whispered words. Brittle, I shouldn't have laughed. "Apologize," Karen echoed, though her voice quivered with a cocktail of fear and shame. It was wrong. Nia swallowed. Hearing the admission loosened a knot inside her chest, yet she sensed the apology was motivated more by hierarchy than remorse. Still, she lifted her chin. "I hope," she said quietly, "you will remember how it feels when someone treats you like you don't belong." Karen's bottom lip trembled. She looked as though she might speak, but a uniformed Port Authority officer arrived, summoned by Robert's silent radio call. The officer gestured politely toward a side corridor. As the attendants were led away, Susan glanced over her shoulder. One last time, eyes wet. Dan started to follow them, then pivoted, stepping toward Michael, "Sir." The word caught. He steadied himself. "I need to say this. I am deeply sorry for not intervening sooner. I tried to temper the situation, brought them your drinks, your meals. But I should have confronted the remarks directly. I was afraid of worsening the conflict." Michael studied the young man. Behind the professional uniform, he saw earnestness and regret warring with workplace conditioning. "Fear is understandable," he said at length, his tone softer than it had been with the others. "But silence sustains injustice. Next time, because there will always be, next time for someone use your voice. Speak up before harm metastasizes, Dan nodded, shoulders sagging with a complicated blend of gratitude and self-reproach. I will, sir. You have my word. Michael extended a hand. Dan took it, a brief, firm clasp that communicated both accountability and a second chance. Only then did Karen's earlier words register with the watching crowd. I didn't even know who you were. A businessman in line for the next flight leaned to his companion and murmured, "That's the CEO." A low ripple of whispers spread outward, like concentric rings on water, astonishment that the man in the impeccably cut navy suit quietly defending his child was the hand atop the whole corporate tiller. Michael ignored the stir. His focus remained on Naya, who exhaled shakily, as if expelling a gallon of stale cabin air. "You did nothing wrong," he reminded her in a voice pitched for her ears alone. "Remember that." She nodded, tears pricking but unshed. In the overhead skylights, her braids caught glints of midday sun, each bead of lacquered wood bright as a filament of hope. Robert motioned toward a seating alcove outfitted with upholstered benches and a living wall planter of peace lilies, one of the airport's attempts at calming design. "Mr. Phillips, I have to draft an OPS 25 preliminary. Would you like to review it? HR can fax the formal packet to corporate by the hour's end. Send it." Michael said, "Attach my field notes and the audio clip. Flag it. Level 3. Misconduct with request for expedited review." His boardroom cadence surfaced crisp and surgical. Then he recalibrated to father mode, glancing at Nia. "But first, my daughter needs water. She's had enough procedural talk for one day." Robert gestured toward a hydration station. Of course, they walked the few steps together. At the dispenser, Nia pressed her reusable bottle beneath the sensor. As water splashed, she asked, "Is it really over?" Her father considered. "This incident is over. The process of making it right has only begun." Nia sipped the cold liquid, soothing her sandpaper throat. "I still feel small," she admitted. "Do you know how stars are born?" Michael said. She shook her head. "They compress. Gravity squeezes dust and gas so tightly that the core ignites. Pressure can make you feel small, but sometimes it forges light. Today you shone even when they tried to smother you." She managed a wobbly smile. "You're mixing astrophysics with pep talks." "I'm a CEO, not an astrophysicist. Mixing metaphors is part of the package." He winked, coaxing a quiet laugh from her. They thanked Robert, who promised SMS updates, and joined the stream toward baggage claim. Every few yards, an employee snapped to attention, acknowledging Michael with nods, ranging from discreet to starstruck. He answered each with measured courtesy, but his hand never left the small of Naya's back. On the escalator, down to Carousel. Nia spoke again, voice low. "Is it bad that I feel a little glad? Not that they're in trouble, but that somebody powerful believed me right away. It's not bad," Michael said. "It's human. Validation heals." A small girl on the step below turned, staring wide-eyed at Nia's braids. Nia smiled. The child's mother mouthed an apology, but Nia waved it off. The innocent curiosity felt worlds apart from the ridicule she'd endured earlier. At the carousel, their bags arrived promptly. One perk of first-class tagging that felt almost ironic after the day's ordeal. Michael hefted Naya's purple suitcase down, then his own sleek carry-on. As they wheeled toward ground transport signage, his phone buzzed. He scanned the screen, a flood of emails from HR corporate communications, flight ops. The machinery of accountability had roared to life. He silenced the device. "Business can wait 10 minutes, he said, unlocking a warm smile for Naya. Ice cream can't. Her eyes widened. Ice cream. Before lunch, today gets its own rules. They detoured to a parlor, wedged between Hudson News and a shoeshine stand. Nia chose mango sorbet. Michael ordered a single scoop of plain vanilla. One indulgence, one anchor. They sat at a window counter that overlooked the taxiway, where tugs nosed wide-body aircraft into place like patient choreographers. Between spoonfuls, Nia said, "Do you ever get tired of fighting these battles?" Michael dabbed a drop of melting vanilla off his cuff. "Yes, and I'll keep doing it anyway, because every time someone's dignity is defended, the next fight gets a little easier." Nia pondered that watching a 757 roll past with flaps drooping for inspection. The tail bore the same Delta widget she'd known her whole life, but now it shimmered with new complexity. Employer protector stage for failure and stage for redemption all at once. By the time father and daughter exited to the curb, a light breeze teased stray wisps of Nia's hair. A black sedan from the executive car service idled at the pickup lane. The driver stepped out, tipped his cap, and loaded their luggage. Michael opened the rear door, but paused. Across the roadway, a trio of flight attendants, in a different livery, Southwest blue, laughed together. One of them had a thick Scottish burr. The sound struck Nia like music. She flashed a smile in their direction, and one of the women waved back ready. Michael asked. "Yes." She breathed, climbing into the car with a surge of quiet confidence. As the sedan merged into traffic, she glanced at her father's reflection in the window. "Thank you for standing up for my voiceover." Michael met her gaze, pride and tenderness mingling in his eyes. "Your voice," he said, "stood up for itself. I was just the microphone." The car accelerated toward Queens Boulevard. In its wake, gate D17 receded. Yet the reverberation of Noor's accent, once mocked, now defended, lingered in the terminal, like the afterglow of a star newly ignited. Somewhere behind them, disciplinary meetings were being scheduled. Policies revisited, attitudes recalibrated. Ahead lay Manhattan's skyline, jagged and brilliant against an early afternoon sky, the perfect reminder that every horizon, however distant, could be reached, as long as voices were allowed to rise and carry. And Nia's voice, strengthened by pressure, was only beginning. Its ascent, Nia and Michael headed to the baggage claim, stepping onto an escalator to reach the arrivals hall. The adrenaline still coursed through their veins. Nia leaned against the handrail, exhaustion evident in her eyes. Michael wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "I'm sorry you had to go through that," he said, voice laced with genuine regret. "I never wanted my daughter to be on the receiving end of such hatred, especially not within an airline." "Eyelid." Nia shook her head. "It's not your fault. Some people just don't understand or respect differences." Michael kissed the top of her head, deciding that from this moment forward, Nia's accent would be celebrated, not ridiculed. He also vowed to personally oversee the disciplinary process for Karen and Susan. As they reached baggage claim, more Delta employees recognized Michael Whispers, followed them something about a major confrontation on the plane, and the CEO traveling incognito. Some staffers approached to offer help with luggage, while others stood at a respectful distance. Word traveled fast. By the time Michael checked his phone, he'd already received emails from the airline's executive leadership team. Robert must have sent out an emergency bulletin explaining the situation. Michael typed a quick reply, requesting an immediate board meeting. While waiting for their bags, Michael asked Nia, "Do you want me to get you a car to the hotel? I need to handle some administrative tasks here, but I'll be there soon." She hesitated, not wanting to separate from him after such an ordeal, but she also recognized his duty. "It's okay, Daddy. I'll be fine. I'll wait at the hotel. You do what you need to do." They retrieved their suitcases, and Michael walked her out to a private driver he'd arranged. Before she climbed in, he held her hands in his. "This is not over, Nia. I promise you, those people will learn the consequences of their actions." Nia nodded, tears glinting in her eyes, but a determined smile on her lips. "Thank you. I love you. I love you too," Michael said, stepping back as the car pulled away. The moment she left, his phone buzzed again. He answered with a terse greeting. The voice on the other end was from the head of Human Resources, expressing shock and dismay at the incident. Michael wasted no time. "We need a conference call with the heads of cabin services, legal and communications immediately. I want a full investigation launched and a public statement prepared if necessary. Also, I will attend the disciplinary hearings personally." The HR head agreed, and Michael headed back into the airport office, mind racing. He knew the airline had protocols, but this was personal. He would ensure the matter was handled fairly, yet firmly, in accordance with the principles he had championed since taking the CEO position. There would be no sweeping this under the rug. While Karen and Susan sat in a small interview room, waiting for disciplinary procedures to begin, the rumor mill churned. Some employees were furious at their colleagues' behavior, seeing it as a direct affront to the diversity. Delta prided itself on. Others were stunned that Karen and Susan had dared to mock anyone's accent, let alone the CIO's daughter. As Michael stepped into the meeting room, he was greeted by a somber-faced panel HR personnel, legal advisors, and some senior executives, all waiting for him to take the lead. His demeanor was as serious as they'd ever seen. Gone was the approachable fatherly warmth he often projected in corporate gatherings. This was Michael Phillips, the uncompromising CEO. The meeting stretched late into the evening. Statements were taken, protocols reviewed. Dan's testimony corroborated Nia's account, revealing a series of repeated discriminatory comments. Karen and Susan tried to argue that it was a misunderstanding or a joke taken out of context, but the panel had no patience for such excuses. The airline's zero-tolerance policy for discrimination was clear. In the end, the recommendation was termination of employment for Karen and Susan. Their actions were deemed gross misconduct, violating multiple policies. Michael accepted the recommendation, but emphasized that Dan should receive counseling and training rather than punishment, given his attempts, albeit limited, to intervene. The panel agreed. As midnight approached, Michael typed a final message to Robert, instructing him to deliver the official decision to Karen and Susan in the morning. He closed his laptop, pinched the bridge of his nose, and thought of Nia. The day had been long, emotionally draining, and far from how he wanted their trip to begin. Still, he felt a measure of satisfaction. Justice, at least in the immediate sense, was being served. He had championed accountability, not as an act of revenge, but as an affirmation of the airline's core values, and more personally, as a father protecting his child. It was 1 a.m. when Michael arrived at the hotel suite in Midtown Manhattan. The lavish room overlooked the city's shimmering skyline. Nia was sound asleep in the bedroom. A warm lamp by the couch illuminated a fruit basket and a note from the hotel manager welcoming him. Michael loosened his tie and sat on the couch, fatigue washing over him. Despite the exhaustion, his mind refused to rest. Memories from the day replayed. Nia's downcast face, the crew's mocking laughter, the mechanical scare, the confrontation at the gate, and the late-night disciplinary meeting. As a CEO, he'd navigated countless crises, financial downturns, public relations, nightmares, logistical snarls, but nothing had cut him as deeply as seeing his child ridiculed. The protective father in him still simmered with anger, even though the professional side had taken swift action. Sleep eventually claimed him, though fitfully. The next morning, Nia woke to find her father already on the phone, coordinating with the airline's corporate communications department. They wanted to craft a statement to ensure rumors didn't spiral out of control. Michael instructed them that while an internal memo was warranted, he didn't want Nia's name splashed in headlines. Protecting her privacy was paramount. After finishing the call, he turned to his daughter with a soft smile. "Good morning. How'd you sleep?" She shrugged. "Okay, I guess I'm still tired. And I keep thinking about what happened." Michael sighed, sitting beside her on the bed. "I'm sorry you had to face that. It's not fair and it's not acceptable." Nia leaned her head on his shoulder. "I know you did your best, Dad." "Thank you." They spent the morning together, eating breakfast in the hotel's lounge. Nia's mood lightened as she recounted fun memories from Ghana, and Michael listened intently, grateful to see her smile returning. He wanted her to know the world was bigger than the cruelty they encountered. Later that day, Michael received news that Karen and Susan had been formally terminated. Word spread quickly among employees, and some posted messages on internal forums celebrating the decision. Others expressed relief that the airline was walking the talk regarding its values. Nia overheard her father on a call and asked him later, "Do you feel bad about firing them? Or was it easy?" She studied his face, seeking an honest answer. Michael chose his words carefully. "I don't celebrate anyone losing their livelihood, but discrimination can't be tolerated. The airline's reputation and values are at stake. And more importantly, you shouldn't have to live in a world where such behavior is swept under the rug. I'd do it again if I had to, if I had." Nia's eyes glistened with gratitude. Despite everything, she felt a sense of closure. She wasn't naive. She knew bigotry existed beyond this one incident. But seeing it confronted so directly gave her hope. The following day, Michael and Nia attended the original event they'd come to New York for a charitable gala supporting international education. Nia wore a sleek sky blue dress, looking both elegant and youthful. Her father, in a tailored tuxedo, introduced her to dignitaries, philanthropists, and business leaders. During a conversation with a Ghanaian official who recognized Nia's accent, the official praised her. "Your accent is beautiful. It speaks of where you come from, who you are." That simple affirmation brought tears to Nia's eyes. Michael watched her interact with luminaries from different corners of the world, each with their own accent and culture. He marveled at how quickly she adapted, greeting them with confident warmth. The memory of Karen and Susan's mockery felt distant, overshadowed by the vast tapestry of global voices embracing Nia as she was. Meanwhile, in Atlanta, Karen and Susan packed up their uniforms for the last time. They faced uncertain futures. The airline's decision was final, and their attempts to appeal fell on deaf ears. Neither had anticipated such severe repercussions for what they considered harmless jokes. But the reality of zero-tolerance policies had proven them wrong. Their reputations within the aviation industry were marred, making it difficult to secure new roles. Dan, on the other hand, continued his duties, albeit under the watchful eye of management. He was enrolled in additional training programs, focusing on diversity, conflict resolution, and intervention. It was a second chance he planned to make the most of. When Michael and Nia flew back to Atlanta a week later, Dan was not on their flight, but he had sent a handwritten note delivered via the flight captain to Mr. Phillips and Miss Nia. "Thank you for teaching me a lesson. Encourage. I'm determined to do better." Nia smiled when she read it, feeling a bittersweet pang. She handed the note to her father, who nodded in silent approval. A small sign that perhaps some good had come of this fiasco. Over the subsequent weeks, the story of the discriminatory flight attendants reached the ears of many in the aviation industry. Some critics accused Michael of overreacting. However, The vast majority, including advocacy groups and social media commentators, applauded Delta Airlines for taking a strong stand. Interviews with other airline professionals revealed a mix of surprise and support. Many voiced that, while such behavior was relatively rare, it was crucial to clamp down on it decisively to maintain an inclusive environment for both passengers and staff. For Michael, the positive feedback was a reaffirmation that he had done the right thing. Behind the scenes, Michael and the leadership team at Delta drafted new training modules. They included real case studies of discrimination, Nia's experience among them. Though her name was never disclosed publicly, the training encouraged employees to proactively intervene when they witnessed harassment or bullying. Nia continued her life, splitting time between school in the US and visits to Ghana. She joined a speech and debate club, finding her unique accent to be a point of fascination for audiences rather than a liability. Each time she spoke, she carried the memory of the flight incident, but she channeled it into confidence rather than fear. Meanwhile, Michael noticed a shift in employee morale. Surveys indicated that employees felt safer and more valued, confident that leadership wouldn't hesitate to defend them or their customers against discriminatory actions. One afternoon, Michael found an envelope on his office desk. Inside was a letter from a mother in Boston who thanked him for protecting people like her daughter, a teen who had also faced ridicule for an accent. The mother wrote, "When I heard what you did for your child, I felt hope for mine. Thank you for setting an example." Touched, Michael placed the letter in a small box of keepsakes. Among them were letters from employees, pictures from charity events, and tokens of gratitude he'd received over the years. This letter, however, carried special weight. It was a testament that personal courage in one instance could resonate with countless others. Around the 3-month mark after the incident, Nia accompanied Michael to a pilot graduation ceremony at Delta's headquarters. She was invited to speak briefly about the importance of diversity. Standing before a group of newly minted pilots from various backgrounds, she shared her story, leaving out specifics, but emphasizing how a single disrespectful act could shatter someone's confidence. We all come from different places, and each accent carries the story of home. She concluded, "We can choose to see that as a source of division or celebration. I hope we choose celebration." The room erupted in applause, and Michael looked on, pride shining in his eyes. In the end, the saga of that disastrous flight evolved into a rallying point for positive change. Policies were strengthened, employees grew more vigilant, and stories of kindness in the skies began to overshadow the negativity. The airline even featured a new campaign tagline, "Every voice takes flight." While it was a subtle nod internally, everyone understood its deeper meaning. 1 year later, on a crisp morning, at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, where the whole ordeal had begun, Michael and Nia strolled through the same terminal as they prepared for another trip. This time, they were heading to London for a global business summit. Nia walked confidently, greeting airport staff with a warm "good morning" in her distinctive accent. Head still turned, but now with smiles rather than sneers. The father-daughter duo reached the Delta counter, and a young gate agent recognized Michael beaming at them. "Welcome back, Mr. Phillips and Miss Nia," she said politely. "We have you in first class today, sir. Let me know if you need anything." Michael and Nia exchanged a knowing glance, remembering a time not so long ago when such a greeting would have been overshadowed by malicious whispers. Today felt different, lighter, more open. That lingering pain from the past was overshadowed by a sense of vindication and hope. Before boarding, they stopped for a quick coffee, While waiting for their drinks, Nia noticed a sign on the wall promoting the airline's new employee training initiative. It showcased diverse faces and the tagline, "Every voice takes flight." She nudged her father, pointing at the poster. "That's our campaign," she asked, a smile tugging at her lips. Michael nodded. "Inspiration comes from real-life stories. Honey, and you inspired a great deal of it." A gentle flush colored her cheeks. She sipped her latte, letting the warmth of that acknowledgement settle in. Father and daughter proceeded to their gate, boarding the flight without incident or unpleasant stares. The cabin crew greeted them warmly, offering them beverages without delay. Once seated, Nia gazed out the window at the runway. Planes taxied in the distance, taking turns to ascend into the open sky. She thought about the countless journeys that happened every day, people crossing borders and oceans, each with a voice, a heritage, a story to tell. She felt a sense of belonging, not just in the US or Ghana, but in the vast tapestry that made up the modern world. Michael watched her, recalling the shy girl who had once been so hurt by the thoughtless actions of 2 flight attendants. Now she seemed poised, self-assured, ready to face anything. The engine roar signaled the plane's takeoff roll. As they accelerated, father and daughter shared a smile. In that moment they ascended, not just physically, but emotionally, leaving behind the bitterness of the past and soaring into a horizon where every voice was acknowledged and respected. The flight became a silent testament to their journey from hurt to healing, from discrimination to empowerment. At 35,000 feet, above clouds that drifted like cotton fields, Nia leaned over to Michael. "Thank you, Dad," she whispered, reaching for his hand. Michael squeezed her hand back. For what he asked, though he already knew, for believing me, for fighting for me, for loving me enough to make things right. A gentle smile curved his lips. Always near, always. And as the plane soared through clear skies, the story of a crew laughing at a black girl's accent ended where it truly belonged, in a cabin filled with respect, acceptance, and the unbreakable bond of a father's love for his daughter, who in turn learned that her voice was as valid as any other in the grand chorus of humanity. Thank you for traveling with us through a tale of pain, resilience, and a father's fierce love. Their journey shows that every time we reject discrimination, be it a mocking remark or an unjust rule, we move the world toward greater empathy. If this story touched you, please share it, leave a quick comment, and hit like and subscribe. Your support lets us keep telling uplifting stories that remind us every voice, every accent deserves to soar.